Hello, my name is Shaun Cronin and I'm from Return to Work Connections. I'm going to talk about the motivational aspects and a person-centered approach to assisting injured workers who cannot return to their pre-injury employer. A lot of what I will share with you is from running a pilot project that looked at alternative approaches to motivation and job seeking in the New South Wales Workers' Compensation Scheme. Unfortunately, the pilot is finished, but I learned a lot about what worked in terms of providing injured workers with the right support to be successful in finding new employment. If you are an injured worker, you'll find some tips on job seeking that you can use to help you find a new role. If you're someone who works in the New South Wales Workers' Compensation Scheme, or any other scheme for that matter, I will also show you how three key concepts, autonomy, competence and relatedness, are important for the well-being of injured workers. What do you want to do? Not being able to return to your pre-injury job is distressing. When someone cannot return to a job or career that they enjoyed or spent years developing, grief is an understandable feeling. This grief is usually accompanied through a loss of self-identity or a loss of self-worth. You can find yourselves in a hole that seems very difficult to climb out of. But I've seen injured workers successfully make the change. And as tough as this sounds, the key is not holding on to your pre-injury role. I get why this is, but it's something that people are reluctant to let go of, and it can be a barrier to moving forward. The people who I have seen succeed have made that difficult decision to accept what's happened, but also to do their best to move on. Remember, you are not your injury, you are not your diagnosis. Whatever has happened in the past is not your future. Another key to making that transition is finding out what you really want to do. The simplest way to start is to think about what type of work you enjoy. Also think about what type of work you don't enjoy. This is just as important. You don't want to end up in a job you don't like. That can actually have an adverse effect on your well-being. I suggest the first step is to discuss what you would like to do with your family, friends and other people you trust. It is important to have your family involved in your return to work. Keep that connection so they can support you. Then do some research. Use the internet to explore what type of roles are available and also the skill set required. This will indicate what transferable skills are needed, but also any personal attributes that employers will look for. There will be a resource that has some links to tools that can help you determine potential new careers based on your experience and personal preferences. I also want to point out that you're allowed to have a say in what type of work you look for and what type of work you want to do. This is related to autonomy. If you have a choice in the types of jobs you're looking for, rather than having choices imposed on you, you are going to feel much more motivated as the job seeking is about you. And as an aside, during the pilot we spent time understanding injured workers' preferences as well as hopes for their future work. We involved them in the planning of the job seeking process to ensure they had meaningful input and were happy with the approach. What are your strengths in job seeking? Okay, you have an idea of what type of jobs you want to look for. The next step is to consider what job seeking skills you have and what skills you need assistance with. Understanding this will remove a common barrier to job seeking. How do I actually look for a job? What do you have confidence in? Is it writing a resume, writing cover letters, cold calling potential employers, doing an interview? I've worked with injured workers who have had no problem in cold calling a prospective employer, but needed assistance with their resume and cover letters. Others had great resumes and cover letters, but were very anxious about interviews. If you have a good understanding of your strengths and the areas that you'll need assistance with, you'll be able to ask for and get the right help. This creates competence. As an injured worker, if you feel you have all the skills at hand to look for a job, then you're more likely to get out there and look. So don't be afraid to say you need help in certain areas. Don't neglect creating a profile on Seek and Indeed with daily job alerts for areas you're interested in. This will give you an idea of what type of roles are out there and what employers are looking for. It will also give you practice writing cover letters and applying for jobs. And don't think you cannot find a job via Seek. I worked with an injured worker who applied for a job via Seek. She called a few days later to follow up. She was then asked to come the next day for a trial. Subsequently, she was offered a traineeship that commenced the following day. And finally, don't dismiss cold calling or dropping your resume off to potential employers. I know injured workers who have found work by doing this. Again, do your research in your local area and target employers you would like to work with. Cold calling can be confronting, but it can be worth it. If you are not comfortable cold calling, practice it with someone who can provide support and feedback. If you become more comfortable and competent at cold calling, then you're more likely to use it. Having good connections with family and others. As an injured worker, you may have experienced a reduction in your circle of friends and or personal professional networks after an injury. Even family relationships can diminish. When your relatedness, that is the sense of belonging and having strong personal connections, is poor, then your well-being suffers. I mentioned before about involving family and friends in your return to work, especially around support for understanding what job you want to do. But this also applies to any person you work with in the New South Wales Workers' Compensation Scheme. Remember, this is your life. Your hopes for the future cannot be distilled into a series of reports. You should be working with people who have your best interests at heart. Granted, they will have their own pressures from within the New South Wales Workers' Compensation Scheme, but I strongly suggest that when you start working with somebody, whether appointed by the insurer or someone that you have requested, that the first thing is to have a good and frank discussion about what you want to achieve, and how you want to do it. Gauge their commitment to supporting you in your return to work, and also have their understanding of how they will treat you respectfully. For anyone working with injured workers, make sure your contact with injured workers is consistent, regular, and also affirming and supportive. If you can build a proper trusting relationship, then you'll see good things happen. As noted, after an injury, your personal and professional network often declines. So I'm going to give you a method about how to build a network that may help you find a job. The secret in building this network is not to ask for a job. You're building a network to explore your return to work options and job preferences. For the particular job you have in mind, ask around your circle of family and friends if they know someone, or if they know someone who knows someone who knows someone, you know what I mean, and ask for an introduction. Then arrange a catch-up in a relaxed situation with that person to ask questions about their job. Over a coffee is not a bad way to do this. The goal is to have a 20-minute conversation with the person about their work. All you need are 3 questions. Examples are, how did you start on your job? What do you like about your job? What does a typical day or week look like? What personal attributes are important in your role? This should start a good conversation. When finished, ask that person to introduce you to 2 more people that can also help you explore the career or return to work options you are interested in. Meet up with them, ask similar questions, then ask for 2 more contacts, and so on. You can see how one person can lead to other contacts and increase your network. It also allows you to present yourself to a potential employer as well. While the person you are talking to may not have a role for you, if they enjoyed the conversation and can see you are interested and enthusiastic about looking for work, they can recommend you to someone else they may know. A lot of jobs come about because of who you know. Using a simple method to build your network can link you to the hidden job market. And always follow up any conversation with a thank you email, text, or call. To help with this, I've created a resource that includes some example questions as well as recording who you have met with. So I've talked about the 3 key elements of well-being: autonomy, competence, relatedness, and how that relates to return to work. So there are a few other aspects of job seeking that I want to go over. Volunteering. Consider community involvement or volunteering as a pathway to return to work. This can be invaluable for demonstrating the skills, expanding your network, and getting you back into a daily routine. One person I work with as part of return to work activities started working on building structures for a community garden. He enjoyed it as it gave him a sense of purpose, and he was recognised by the community for his work. He was also utilising skills in carpentry he had, but had not used in his previous role as a truck driver. Using his personal network, he found out about position as a cabinet maker. It led to a job, and he was able to demonstrate his skills and willingness to work to a potential employer. All this came from volunteering in his local community. And you can see how his need for autonomy, competence, and relatedness were all satisfied by volunteering. Transferable skills. Everyone has transferable skills. These skills are not always about having qualifications. Examples are the ability to work as a team, working under pressure, leadership skills, even life experience. Another example, there was a person who could not return to work as a truck driver, not the previous person I mentioned. He had retrained as a forklift driver, but was having trouble finding a role. After one interview, the company contacted him and said he didn't get the job. However, they offered him a team leader role as his experience and leadership skills were very evident during the interview. He got the job for his transferable skills. Another example, this person had a background in warehousing but could not return to that role due to her injury. She expressed an interest in childcare. Together, we looked into what skills were required for that role. Teamwork was a big one, but also the ability to work independently when required. She had also raised 3 children and had volunteered to be a teacher's assistant when they were younger. Emphasising his transferable skills and her life experience helped her attain a role in childcare. Retraining. Retraining is an option. I suggest that you have a look at the CIRA training program guidance material. Understanding this will help you navigate the requirements for approval with a rehabilitation provider and insurer. A common approach is to find a job where the company will put you through a course if you gain employment. This often relates to understanding your transferable skills. Going back to the previous example about the person who changed jobs to childcare, the job she found was one where the company would support her in completing qualifications in childcare. And some people will return to university study while they are injured. If you're doing this and you're ready to return to work, to consider a role that complements your study without needing to have finished the degree. Another real-life example, a recent one actually. A worker decided to start a degree in psychology while totally unfit. Once he had capacity, he wanted to find a role where he could gain practical experience without needing to have finished his degree. Eventually, he found the role as a psychosocial support worker. It was a great alignment of his preferences for suitable employment as well as his interests in his study. Disclosure. I've often discussed with injured workers about whether to disclose if they have a workplace injury. There is no requirement to do so when applying for a job, but the decision to disclose or not is quite tricky. If the provider assisting you is using the CIRA incentives for employers, then if you go to an interview, then it's likely an employer is aware of your injury. However, if you find your own interview through cold calling or networking, then you may need to make a decision. It may not come up, but if it does, then be honest. Use this opportunity to explain why you would have no issues in doing the job. It should be within your capacity and promote yourself as a right candidate. If you're working with a rehabilitation provider, please make sure you discuss this and they are aware of your preferences. Injured workers have related to me situations where the provider has arranged an interview with a prospective employer but not informed them that it was a person with a workplace injury. This created stress for the injured worker as the injury came up during the interview, and it led to a deterioration in relationship with the provider. Make sure you have a very clear understanding of any providers you're working with about disclosure. Also, if you have been injured at work and had time off, this does create a gap in your resume. A common concern is how to address this. When I was working with injured workers, we addressed this via the cover letter. The cover letter would have a line like, I've had a career break and during that time I decided to consider a change to a different industry or career. It can be as simple as that, and then you can disclose the reason for the gap later during the interview if asked. Some final thoughts. There is a difference between finding a job for the sake of it and what is known as good work. Good work is work that is engaging, that treats you fairly, improves your well-being and helps you progress. This is the work I hope you can find. I will be blunt and say sometimes it won't be easy, but in my experience, those who decided to actively take charge of their job seeking and persist despite the bad days end up finding work. And it works best when you have autonomy, feel competent, be able to effectively look for a job, but also have meaningful, strong relationships, not just with your family, but with also any providers that you are working with. This will enhance your well-being. For anyone who works with injured workers, while not a deep dive, understanding how to apply the 3 concepts can help you promote well-being with injured workers. It can also work with people who have not changed their return to work goal and can be a key component of any early intervention strategy. Please feel free to reach out to discuss any of these tips, any questions, or even let me know how these tips may have helped you. My email is Shaun, SHAUN, @rtwc.com.au, and my phone number is 0481 211 885. Finally, thank you, Rosemary, for the invitation to be part of the Injured Worker Wellbeing Week. It has been a privilege. Thank you.